Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and these are the 10 best cards from the Naxxramas adventure. Now you might be asking yourself, why is he talking about Naxxramas? That's a super old adventure, and not only that, but it's about to be wiped out of existence with the standard format change that's coming very soon. Well, that's not true. It's not being wiped out of existence. Naxxramas cards will still be a very important and integral part of Wild format, and I'm not giving up on Wild format. I still think there's some great cards and a lot of fun to be had on Wild. I'm going to be building decks and playing on the Wild ladder as well as the Standard ladder, and there will be a lot of new Hearthstone players who still wonder which Naxxramas cards are the most impactful and important, and I want to make a video that helps them out. Plus, I think it's just fun to talk about the 10 best cards from a certain expansion, and I haven't done it for Naxxramas yet. So that said, the 10th best card from the Naxxramas adventure is the Priest's Dark Cultist. When this came out, it was kind of a mind-blowing 3-mana minion. It was widely considered the best 3-mana minion in the game, and still, in fact, is pretty close to that. It was one of the first 3/4 3-mana cards, which has kind of become a standard nowadays, but back then, when Naxxramas first hit, it was absolutely crazy, and it's still incredibly good, particularly when Dark Cultist has a great death rattle like this one that gives a random friendly minion plus 3 health. Priests can really benefit from a sticky board with a lot of high health minions. They have a lot of different heals and synergies that are great when minions have tons of health, and Dark Cultist helps you set that up while still playing a very strong on-curve body for 3 mana. He's been fundamental in a variety of different Priest decks and has been played up to this day. Although he will sadly be lost in Standard format, I think he'll still be a great card for Priest in the Wild format. Moving on to the 9th best Naxxramas card. It actually belongs to the Paladin's spell Avenge. This 1-mana secret is pretty strong. In fact, probably the strongest of all Paladin secrets. When one of your minions dies, give a random friendly minion +3/+2. That means you're really getting essentially a 3/2 in stats for 1 mana, which is very hard to pull off in the game otherwise. And if it lands on something like a shielded mini-bot with Divine Shield, Avenge, of course, gets even better. So there are a lot of great ways to make Avenge very good, and with Paladin, who typically has so many different Silverhand recruits on the board, or a variety of different minions, and sticky minions at that, Avenge is very likely to go off early and give you a nice, strong early game advantage. Of course, Avenge is also popularized with Mysterious Challenger and Secret Paladin decks, where it was core as one of the secrets in that suite of secrets that Secret Paladin said secret a lot, so regularly used. So Avenge got even better with the Grand Tournament and has been annoying people ever since, and remains really the best in one of the go-to Paladin secrets for Wild format. Moving on to the 8th best Naxxramas card, I believe it is Rubian Egg. This is a 2-mana 0/2, widely called one of the craziest and best cards of Naxxramas when the adventure was released. I think it took a little while for Rubian Egg to really pick up steam, but it's been a staple part of so many different decks since then. The just raw value that it offers as a potential 4/6 in stats for 2 mana is unparalleled to this day, and there are so many different buffing and taunting style decks that have been able to take advantage of Rubian Egg and force opponents' hands basically into unlocking that 4/4 Rubian. It's really been one of the defining cards in Zoo Warlock, and Zoo Warlock has been one of the defining decks in Hearthstone, but it shows up from time to time in other decks too, like Druids and even Paladins. So Rubian Egg has been a big part of the metagame for a very long time, and it's going to be hard to replace for those early game board presence style decks, and that's why it's so high on this list. Moving on to number 7, it's actually the card Deathlord. This 3-mana 2/8 with taunt is a crazy body for 3 mana. Of course, it does have that negative death rattle. Your opponent puts a minion from their deck into the battlefield. Yeah, that's a pretty bad downside, but Deathlord is designed to counter aggressive style decks. And aggressive style decks typically run very cheap, inefficient minions. So when they pull them out of the deck for free, it's really not all that penalizing. They might just get a 2/1 that lost its battle cry, for instance. So Death Lord has really served its purpose as a great, almost ideally designed anti-aggro card that's able to balance its downside Death Rattle just because of the kinds of decks it's designed to beat. So Death Lord, of course, has showed up in a variety of different decks, particularly those designed towards the late game for control-style battles. It's also even been featured in fatigue-style decks because it does have the benefit of thinning out your opponent's deck more quickly, which means they draw into fatigue damage even faster than normal. So Death Lord, even though it was designed for one very core purpose, has actually been played in a number of different ways in a wide variety of decks, and that's why it's on my list. So moving on to the 6th best Naxxramas card. The honor goes to Haunted Creeper. This is just another one of the many really powerful Death Rattle minions that arrived with Naxxramas and really helped create a sort of Death Rattle meta for a very long time, particularly with the card Undertaker initially, but that has since been nerfed. But anyway, back to Haunted Creeper. It's just another one of those really powerful value minions. There's so many stats bundled into this for a really efficient mana cost. You get the 1/2 initially, which is actually not that bad because it tends to trade sort of favorably into 1 health minions in the early game. But then, of course, it also has that great Death Rattle that summons 2 1/1 Spectral Spiders, which means in total you're getting 3/4 in stats for 2 mana, which, as I mentioned before, a 3/4 for 3 is very good, so a 3/4 for 2 is even better. And when it's split across a variety of bodies, as it is with Haunted Creeper, it's even harder sometimes for opponents to deal with, making it a really sticky minion that's great for board presence style decks that like lots of minions or have various kinds of buffing or taunt effects like Zoo. And of course, Haunted Creeper has been a staple in Zoo. It's also worked in Hunter and Druid and 1,000 other classes. It's just such a good 2-drop. In fact, arguably the best 2-drop in the game in my mind, or at least one of the best 2-mana minions in the game. And certainly one of the best cards from Naxxramas as well. But not the best. There are 5 more I think are even more important to the metagame, starting with the warrior card Death's Bite. This 4-mana weapon does 4 damage, and it has 2 durability, which is pretty solid and comparable to other weapons. So that right there is good for attack, is enough to deal with a lot of stuff in the early to mid game. But it's really the Death Rattle that has defined Death's Bite. It deals 1 damage to all minions whenever this weapon is destroyed or runs out of durability. So essentially it's a really strong weapon with a whirlwind effect built right in, and of course whirlwind effects are integral to success of the warrior class. They have so many different cards that benefit from doing damage to their own minions, and of course it never hurts when you can hit the enemy minions for 1 health too. It's really easy for clearing up a lot of different little tokens like imps or Silverhand recruits. So there are both offensive and defensive value from Death's Bite. And of course, just doing 4 attack to the face sometimes is great as well. This card has been in virtually every warrior deck in existence since it arrived. It's really good in control-style warriors. It's probably the defining card, other than Grim Patron, in Grim Patron-style decks, which define the metagame for a very long time and are still viable to this day. It basically allowed warriors to pull out Whirlwind as a card and bundle it into one very strong card in its place. And that's why you always see Death's Bite in every single warrior deck in existence. It's going to hurt the class to lose it. It seems like Whispers of the Old Gods has already lined up some replacements for this one, but I don't think they'll ever be able to design a warrior card that fits the class quite as well as this one. And that's why, even though it's a class card, it still ranks pretty highly on my overall list of Naxxramas cards. But let's move on to the 4th best Naxxramas card. I think it's Zombie Chow. This is somewhat surprising maybe to some folks, but Zombie Chow is really the ultimate anti-aggro card. Anytime you know you're playing a fast deck and you draw Zombie Chow on turn 1, you feel like you're in a pretty good place and have a great chance to win the game. And why is that? It's just because Zombie Chow's stats and its mana cost are so good at slowing down early aggression. At 3 health, it means it can trade usually into multiple minions in the early game, stuff that has 1 or 2 attack. It takes a couple of those to kill Zombie Chow. As a 2-attack minion, it also kills most of that early game stuff too. It trades evenly with 3 2-drops, which is important. It basically just says, I'm going to get up on the board first, no matter what you do. It doesn't matter how much early game stuff you play. I'm probably going to be able to keep up, which is really important, that you don't let those aggro style decks build up ahead of steam and just roll over you by turn 3 or 4. So Zombie Chow stops all of that in its tracks. Of course, it does have the very negative death rattle, restore 5 health to the enemy hero, but typically when you're playing against fast decks, you don't really care to give them health, particularly in the early game, because they might be at full health anyway, and you're not yet focused on killing them regardless of how much health they have. So you have time to kill them, and you don't really care that Zombie Chow healed them in the first place. But that death rattle, of course, has been used to wide fame in Priest decks in combination with Auchenai Soul Priest as an actual 5 damage dealt to the enemy hero, doing stuff like a crazy 10 damage burst with 2 Zombie Chows and an Auchenai Circle of Healing combo. So, great anti-aggro card, fits into any deck that wants to play into the late game but needs 1 or 2 early game answers to aggro. Just a perfectly balanced and well-designed card. And I don't know how Blizzard can replace it for standard format, but I'm glad it's not going anywhere in wild format, because I absolutely love everything about Zombie Chow, and that's why it's number 4 on my list. But it's not one of the 3 best. I have 3 cards I actually believe are better. Number 3, in fact, is Mad Scientist. This 2-mana 2/2 has decent stats for its body, nothing particularly exciting or to write home about. But it's the death rattle for Mad Scientist that just makes it so outrageously powerful. And I would argue overpowered and bordering on unfair and even broken. The death rattle for Mad Scientist, put a secret from your deck into the battlefield. So not only does the death rattle on Mad Scientist operate as a form of card draw, in other words, it draws a card out of your deck, which, you know, is similar to a card like Loot Hoarder, but that's a 2/1 for 2. Not only does it pull it out of your deck, but it actually puts it into play as well, which means you get the card draw and you get the cost reduction and the immediacy of that secret. So it's a huge tempo gain, it's an efficiency gain, it's a card draw gain, and it's all attached to a pretty reasonable 2/2 body. That's why Mad Scientist is fantastic in Mage, because you get a 3-mana secret for free. So, of course, Freeze Mage uses it, Tempo Mage, everybody uses it. Even Mech Mages were playing Mad Scientist to some extent. Hunter, it's also fantastic in, because you get those 2-mana secrets for free, which is still very nice, particularly when Hunter's trying to get a lot of stuff onto the board to make a quick impact and kill their opponents rapidly. It hasn't seen a lot of play in Paladin as the other secret class, just because Paladin secrets are only 1 mana, so the advantage you gain is limited. But it's so synonymous with Hunter and Mage, and included in virtually every version of either of their decks, that it's a staple card and one of the most broken cards in the game. I actually can't believe it never quite got nerfed, just because it can do so very much. And that's why it's number 3 on my list. But it's not the best. I've got 2 more I think are even better, starting with number 2, which is Loatheb. This is surprisingly the only Naxxramas legendary to make the list, just because most of them weren't that good, and there are a lot of great neutral cards and other rarities. But Loatheb does deserve a spot close to the top, just because it's a fantastic, solid, all-around card. For 5 mana, you get a 5/5 body, which is right in line with exactly what you want. That's a great stat allocation. Good attack, good health, trades favorably into tons of stuff, threatening to your opponent's face and their board. And of course, attached to that solid body is also one of the best battlecry effects in the game as far as I'm concerned. Enemy spells cost 5 more mana next turn, so Loatheb not only threatens and challenges the board, but also disrupts and creates friction in your opponent's hand, making himself harder to remove, because they might not be able to allocate that mana for the fireball to kill Loatheb, but can also disrupt their plans in the late game, stopping stuff like a miracle turn from a rogue, stopping a lethal combo from a druid, preventing extra burst damage from a freeze mage, It counters so many different things. It's good almost any time you play it. It's got great stats, solid value all around, perfectly designed card, great legendary, and almost the best card in Naxxramas. Of course, Lotheb fits into almost any deck. It has been played in countless decks. It's just one of the best 5-drops in the game. But actually, not even the best 5-drop in Naxxramas as far as I'm concerned. The best card in the entire expansion, in my mind, is actually the Sludgebelcher. This 5-mana minion really is the defining taunt card in Hearthstone so far, and hopefully it gets replaced with something of equal value from Whispers of the Old Gods in the standard format, because Sludgebelcher single-handedly contributed to a change in Hearthstone. It helps slow things down. It gives every deck a really annoying taunt to slide into the mid-game to stop that early aggression. It's a solid body as a 3/5. Of course, the Death Rattle is what makes Sludgebelcher so very good. You get the 3/5 taunt to start, which is solid. It trades into stuff. It has 5 health, which is annoying. But then splitting the body in half is so much better. If this were a 4/7 with taunt, it wouldn't be that much harder to kill. But the fact that it has a second minion that also has taunt, that's also annoying to kill, just makes Sludgebelcher very ridiculous to deal with. It slows down opponents, it disrupts their turn, it creates problems, it has tons of Death Rattle synergies. There's just so much about this card that is perfectly designed and fits into so many different decks, and that's why you see it in almost every control deck ever. There's room for Sludgebelcher because it's just the perfect taunt. It's the game's best, most reasonably costed, most efficient, most annoying taunt card, and really one of the defining cards from Naxxramas, and to me, the best card from Naxxramas. So there you have it. That is my list of the 10 best cards from Naxxramas. You might be saying, oh my gosh, you left off so many good cards. And yeah, I did leave off some great cards because Naxxramas had awesome cards. Shade Naxxramas deserves a spot on the list. Unstable Ghoul is a fantastic card. Echoing Ooze has seen play. Void Collar is a great card. So yeah, there were some cards that deserved honorable mentions. Duplicate's great. Web Spinner's awesome too. So I'm sorry they didn't make the cut. I had to narrow it down to 10. If you think I'm crazy, if you got a good argument for why one of the cards I missed deserves a spot, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.